Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. For some reason, there was some issue with Zoom's screen share, so we couldn't share the screen today. So we're going to have to make do just reciting the word today, and that's it. So, inshallah, we'll make the best of it. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب من شر النفثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق من شر غاسق إذا وقب من شر النفثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك رب يحضرون. ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك رب يحضرون. ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك رب أن يحضرون. أفحسبتم أنما خلقناكم عبثا وأنكم إلينا لا ترجعون. فتعالى الله الملك الحق لا إله إلا هو رب العرش الكريم. ومن يدعو مع الله إلها آخر لا برهان له به فإنما حسابه عند ربه إنه لا يفلح الكافرون. وقل رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. فسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون وله الحمد في السماوات والأرض وعشيا وحين تظهرون. يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي ويحيي الأرض بعد موتها وكذلك تخرجون. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون. هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. سلام على المحسنين في العالمين إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين إنهم من عبادنا المؤمنين. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. اللهم إني أصبحت منك في نعمة وعافية وستر فأتمم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أصبحت منك في نعمة وعافية وستر فأتمم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أصبحت منك في نعمة وعافية وستر فأتمم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأن سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده. آمنت بالله العظيم كفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله السميع العليم. آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله السميع العليم. آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله السميع العليم. رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا بسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبي ورسولا. رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا بسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبي ورسولا. رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبيا ورسولا. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. 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 اللهم إني أسألك من فجاءة الخير وأعوذ بك من فجاءة الشر. اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت خلقتني وأنا عبدك وأنا على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعت. أعوذ بك من شر ما صنعت. أبؤ لك بنعمتك علي وأبؤ بذنبي فاغفر لي فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت. اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت عليك توكلت وأنت رب العرش العظيم. ما شاء الله كان ما لم يشأ لم يكن ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير وأن الله قد أحاط بكل شيء علما. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من شر نفسي ومن شر كل دابة أنت آخذ بناصيتها إن ربي على صراط مستقيم. يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك أستغيث من عذابك أستجير أصلح لي شأني كله ولا تكلني إلى نفسي ولا إلى أحد من خلقك طرفة عين. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الهم والحزن وأعوذ بك من العجز والكسل وأعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل وأعوذ بك من غلبة الدين وقهر الرجال. اللهم إني أسألك العافية في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في ديني ودنياي وأهلي ومالي. اللهم استر عوراتي وآمن رواتي. اللهم احفظني من بين يدي ومن خلفي وعن يميني وعن شمالي ومن فوقي وأعوذ بعظمتك الأغتال من تحتي. اللهم أنت خلقتني وتهديني وتطعمني وتسقيني وتميتني وتحييني وأنت على كل شيء قدير. أصبحنا على فطرة الإسلام وعلى كلمة الإخلاص وعلى دين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وعلى ملة أبينا إبراهيم حنيفا مسلما وما كان من المشركين. اللهم بك أصبحنا بك أمسينا بك نحيا بك نموت وعليك نتوكل وإليك النشور. أصبحنا وأصبح الملك لله والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم نسألك خير هذا اليوم فتحه ونصره ونوره وبركته وهداه. اللهم إني أسألك خير هذا اليوم خير ما فيه وخير ما قبله وخير ما بعده. وأعوذ بك من شر هذا اليوم شر ما فيه وشر ما قبله وشر ما بعده. اللهم ما أصبح بي من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك، لك الحمد ولك الشكر على ذلك. سبحان الله بحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله بحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله بحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله عدد ما خلق السماء، سبحان الله عدد ما خلق الأرض، سبحان الله عدد ما بين ذلك، سبحان الله عدد ما هو خالق. الحمد لله عدد ما خلق السماء، الحمد لله عدد ما خلق الأرض، الحمد لله عدد ما بين ذلك، الحمد لله عدد ما هو خالق. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما خلق السماء، لا إله إلا الله عدد ما خلق بالأرض، لا إله إلا الله عدد ما بين ذلك، لا إله إلا الله عدد ما هو خالق. الله أكبر عدد ما خلق بالسماء، الله أكبر عدد ما خلق بالأرض، الله أكبر عدد ما بين ذلك، الله أكبر عدد ما هو خالق. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما خلق بالسماء، لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما خلق في الأرض، لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما بين ذلك، لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما هو خالق. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة 1000 مرة. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة 1000 مرة. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة 1000 مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله، صلاة وسلاما دائمين بدوام ملك الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة 1000 مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله، صلاة وسلاما دائمين بدوام ملك الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة 1000 مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله، صلاة وسلاما دائمين بدوام ملك الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة 1000 مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله، صلاة وسلاما دائمين بدوام ملك الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة 1000 مرة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. As everybody could see here, we're blacked out for some reason. The Zoom was not connecting to today, this morning. There was some issue with Zoom not connecting to YouTube for some reason. Hopefully that'll be resolved by tomorrow. As we proceed to Surah Yasin, we want to give the hibat al-thawab. We want to give a hiba of the thawab, the reward of this Surah Yasin, to an aunt of one of our locals, Sister Fatima. The family is a great family, beautiful family from Sierra Leone, and they had a aunt yesterday, lived in Morocco, who died due to cancer. So her name was Manjula Bayo, and we want to, she requested that the reward of this Yasin be granted to her aunt, and of course we will do that bi'idhnillah ta'ala. And there is also another brother of ours, deceased recently, Michael Sujic. He came to the masjid this past I think it was the winter. Ahmed Sujic, his son, just suddenly passed away. Just a quick sudden death that was not expected. So likewise, the request has been made for Isal al-Thawab, that the reward of this Yasin be granted to them. So inshallah, we will do that as well. And in that respect, all that a person must do is just make the intention that the reward is given to those individuals. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوا ما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أن حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لا يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين ينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون اللهم إنا نستحفظك ونستودعك أدياننا وأبداننا وأنفسنا وأهلنا وأولادنا وأموالنا كل شيء أعطيتنا اللهم اجعلنا وإياهم في كنفك وأمانك وعياذك من كل شيطان مريد وجبار عنيد وذي بغي وذي حسد من شر كل ذي شر إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم جملنا بالعافية والسلامة وخلقنا بالتقوى والاستقامة وعدنا من موجبات الندامة إنك سميع الدعاء اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا وأولادنا ومشايخنا وإخواننا في الدين وأصحابنا ولمن أحسن إلينا والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات يا رب العالمين صلى اللهم على عبدك ورسولك سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وارزقنا كمال المتابعة له ظاهرا وباطنا في عافية وسلامة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين الحمد لله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. As everybody could see here, we were blacked out this morning. We had some, I don't know what is going on with Zoom. There's always some glitch with these online things. and we had a glitch where we couldn't get on. We actually couldn't even we couldn't get on Zoom to YouTube, so we're blacked out. But we'll treat it like radio. I mean, if it was radio, if it was a radio station, this is what it would feel like. So we'll get to the live chat. There's a number of questions on the live chat, but first we'll continue what we were doing, which was that we were going through these biographies, and we're going to go through biographies of scholars, groups from the rest of the world too. But we're just going to go through what came upon us today, and what came upon us recently were the biographies of the Ba'alawi Sayyids of Hadramaut recently, because of the death of Habib Ali al-Mashhur Ibn Hafiz. So Ibn Muhammad bin Salim, that we read about, Habib Ali al-Mashhur Ibn Muhammad ibn Salim, and we read about them and we showed their pictures up, and that was something that we were able to do when we were on Zoom. But now that we're not on Zoom, let's just keep reading these biographies. We shouldn't let anything stop us. We'll just adjust and adapt accordingly, and then we'll get to some of the questions in the live chat. Now, today I actually want to jump back a little bit. I want to jump back a couple centuries to somebody whose name I mentioned earlier, who is Al-Faqih al-Muqaddam. The Al-Faqih al-Muqaddam literally means the scholar or the jurist who is put forward. Okay. He's also known as Al-Ustad al-A'zam, the greatest teacher. And he is basically the beginning. There were always scholars in the Ba'alawi, but he's the one who established the idea that the Habaib will be a scholarly tribe. Tribes in those days tended to divide themselves, and you'll see this all over the place. Either tribes of knowledge, tribes of business, or tribes of war. Right? And he is the one who said, we will break our sword and we will become a tribe of knowledge, and we will no longer partake in any strife in Yemen. Because before that, there was a lot of strife, and tribes attacked the Ba'alawis, right? Or the Habaib. Before, of course, they were called Habaib. They were just people, right? They were just known as, they didn't have this reputation yet. So his name is Muhammad ibn Alawi, ibn Muhammad, ibn Ali, right? Ibn Alawi, ibn Muhammad, ibn Alawi, ibn Ubaidullah, ibn Ahmad ibn Isa. And Ahmad ibn Isa, of course, is the first one to migrate from Iraq down to Yemen, and fleeing one of the sects, one of the groups that are out there in Iraq that took over. Ibn Muhammad ibn Ali al-Uraydi ibn Ja'far al-Sadiq ibn Muhammad al-Baqir ibn Ali Zain al-Abidin ibn Hussein ibn Ali ibn Fatima al-Zahra. Okay. A man once came to Sayyidina Umar and said, I'm proposing so-and-so to be the governor. He said, what's his lineage? Right? And the man said, oh, Umar, do we hire people based upon their lineage? Umar said to him, tell me the truth. Do you buy a horse without asking its lineage? Right? And the man laughed. Right? Because when, like race horses and real people who are interested in horses, they look at the lineage, right? I don't know where this is the source from. So you go to coffee. You want to get coffee, they'll tell you the lineage, the location, right? Like where it was, which farm, and all that stuff. And when you really get involved, they'll tell you which farm and methods in which it was raised, blah, blah, blah. So human beings have origins. And those origins will affect, how that person comes out. That doesn't mean that you're going to get away with murder. And it doesn't mean you're going to be given something without having earned it. But it does inform us a little bit about, or a lot bit about, your background. Al-Faqih al-Muqaddam was born in Tarim, and we're talking 574 years after the Hijrah, or 1178 in the Common Era. He grew up in an environment of knowledge and righteousness, memorizing the Quran and studying the sciences of the sacred law in his youth. He studied at the hands of Tarim's greatest scholars and very quickly surpassed his peers until he reached the rank of Mujtahid and became known as Al-Faqih, or the jurists. Right? One of the scholars once asked him about 300 masail. Masail is like an issue in fiqh, in the various Islamic sciences, in one majlis, and he clarified every single issue, and his answers were put together in a separate book. At the same time, he adopted the path of spiritual struggle until Allah gave him the greatest of openings. He would teach and fast during the day and spend his nights in worship in one of the caves of Nu'ayr outside of Tarim. One night, his son Ahmed followed him. When the Imam was remembering Allah, the entire valley was shaking with beating, yani, like releasing like a sound. At which point his son actually fell unconscious. Now, we're obviously a people who don't separate between law and spirituality. And this is what he did right here. Although his predecessors embodied the way of ihsan, okay, he was the first of the Adawi Sayyids to outwardly profess this in the form of tasawwuf. So they all had, they all were upright. All his predecessors were upright. But he was the first one to formalize this and to adopt it formally. Okay. And he followed the Moroccan scholar Shu'aib Abu Madyan, who sent his envoy to Tarim with instructions to invest him with the khirqa, or the mantle, symbolizing the transmission of authority. So they never actually physically met, but there were messengers going back and forth from Tarim and Morocco. Sheikh Abu Madyan also instructed his envoy to go to Sheikh Sa'id ibn Isa al-Amudi in Qaidun in the Diwan Valley to likewise invest him. Al-Faqih did not, however, fully embrace everything about Sheikh Abu Madyan. Rather, he took the path which was a combination of the way of Abu Madyan and the way of Abdul Qadir al-Jailani and the way of his forefathers. So in other words, he established his own path, which was combined, okay, of the teachings of Abu Madyan, teachings of Abdul Qadir al-Jailani, and he was and his own forefathers, and he was assisted in this by Sheikh Sa'id al-Amudi, who came to Tarim to offer him his support. Now, one thing to mention here. Who is Abu Madyan? Now, this is one of the biographies we're going to have to read, okay, one of these days. Abu Madyan is the da'iyah, the imam of al-Maghrib of that time. And he was an Andalusi boy who was lived way up north, where there weren't a lot of people in that area where he lived. His mother died, so he was living with his father and his brother. That's it. Just a father and his brother as farmers. Very quiet life, very simple life. There used to be a man, a neighbor, who used to recite the Quran out loud. So Abu Madyan, as a boy, used to go to him and just listen. He used to love listening to the Quran. And then he would get in trouble for not farming, etc. Then the father died. And the brother was very mean to him. Okay? He was very mean to him. So he ends up running away from home. And he runs away from home, and he's sort of in the middle of nowhere until he finds an old man in a hut. And he takes refuge with this old man. And he says, my brother is so mean to me. Okay? And I'm running away from home, etc., etc. So he ends up staying with this old man. And the old man says, well, if you're going to live with me, might as well teach you something of this deen. So he teaches him how to make wudu, how to pray, and how to recite the Quran. And Abu Madyan, Shu'aib is his real name, right? And Shu'aib, anytime you've seen Abu Madyan, it's a nickname for Shu'aib, because Madyan is the city of Shu'aib, right? So Abu Madyan is the person of Madyan, which is Sayyidina Shu'aib. So his name was Shu'aib. So he takes a love and a liking to the deen, and this man was a zahid and a abid. So the man would go about living his normal life, but he would then spend long periods of time reciting the Quran, praying tahajjud, and being a zahid. And Abu Madyan simply fell in love with it. Okay? And he said, I want to be like you and I want to live like you. Now, he didn't know a lot of things. So he ends up, the old man says, well, son, if you want to advance, let me tell you, you should go study, right? Don't just live a simple life like me and just worship Allah, because that's not enough, right? You're a young man. You should go study. So he's like, well, how do I do that? Now, literally, this is a young man now, maybe like 14 years old, 15 years old at this time, who literally doesn't know people. He's never been to the great mosque of Cordoba. He's not from the cities, right? He's not from anywhere established. So he said, you need to travel all the way down south, and you need to cross the water, and you need to go to a city called Fez. And you need to enroll in the Jami'ah there called Al-Qarawiyyin. So he does this. He takes on this journey. For him, this is like the journey of a lifetime. He's traveling across down the whole. Imagine you're at the age of 14, 15, and you're up here, let's say, in like Minnesota or Wyoming or something, one of these northern cities, and someone tells you you got to travel all the way across the country to go to New York City, right? It's going to be a shocking experience. So he does this. It's a big, arduous journey. He makes it all the way down to the Qarawiyyin, penniless. He has no penny. He knows nobody. He has no friends. He has no relatives. He has no even ma'arif. No, he doesn't even know anybody. He enrolls at the Qarawiyyin. They say to him, okay, what do you have? What do you possess? He says nothing. They give him, they don't even give him a room. They tell him there's a masjid there. You can live in the masjid. There's an old masjid that nobody uses anymore. You could take it as a room. You could sleep there. And sponsors will cover your tuition, right? So he does this. And he goes in, and he is so intimidated by everything. Completely intimidated by everything. Everything is over his head. Yet he starts studying. And he starts taking his classes, and but he's different from the other students. He doesn't live in the dorm with the other students. When we say dorm, they had these gorgeous buildings for students to live in. But he lives all alone in this mosque. So he's living sort of that life of a zahid. He's all alone, and he develops that way. And he studies arduously for 4 years, developing in his own way, privately, away from all the other students at nighttime. And that's how he develops. He actually becomes good. He becomes very knowledgeable. And when Abu Madyan graduates, he decides, now notice, he's not corrupted by family influence, tribal influence. He's not corrupted by anything. He's totally a pure, clean slate. He decides he's going to do dawah, right? Where is he needed most? In the villages. So he comes out, he leaves Fez, and he hears about a village of people who follow a man who is not learned. He's not a scholar. So he says, let me go investigate and educate them. And he goes there, and he ends up finding a village, and the sheikh there is an old man who listens to him, and he's like, this man is not a scholar. But everyone follows him. He's the sheikh of the village, but he's also their scholar. His name is Abu Ya'za Yalanur. This is his name, Abu Ya'za Yalanur, which is like a mixture between like Berber and Arabic. And he goes there, and he's saying and he watches what they're doing. And he's like, these people, they don't really know fiqh. They don't have much knowledge. They're just Berbers, and they're following this man who does a lot of ibadah, and they love him, but they don't know fiqh, right? So I have to educate them. So he has that initial conversation, and Abu Yazid doesn't like the way this conversation's going, right? He's offended by this. Some upstart kid coming to me from the Qarawiyyin and telling me what to do. He doesn't like it. And this conversation occurs in front of people. So there was no respect for the older man, right? And he's telling him that everything he's doing is wrong. Now, one thing he didn't realize is Abu Ya'za was a man who was gifted. Allah Ta'ala, even though he wasn't a scholar, Allah Ta'ala gifted him, right, with the ability to guide his people. Okay. Next morning, Abu Madyan wakes up, can't see. He's completely blind. He cannot see. He realizes, I think I've offended the wrong person. So he goes weeping to Abu Yaza and he says, I offended you. I apologize. I'm very sorry. And this and that. And he said, what can I do? Can you find me a cure? What happened? Can you do something? He said, I have the cure. Is very simple. He said, what is it? He said, you wait. When the masjid fills up, I want you to come and rub your face in my pillow where I sit down. Right? You offended me yesterday. You're going to make up for it today. He said, I'll do anything. He goes and does it. When the masjid fills up, he goes, does that. And lo and behold, his vision comes back to him. He starts weeping and he apologizes. He realizes he has something to learn from this man by the name of Abu Ya'za al-Nur. And he realizes he has something, he has a lot to learn. There's a lot he doesn't know about the true nature of life and Salihin and Awliya. So he sits with Abu Ya'za and he absorbs and he absorbs and he absorbs. Now he's sitting, recognizing the authority of Abu Ya'za, that even though he's not a scholar of the outward sciences, he does know the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to please Allah, okay, what angers Allah. He knows these things that relate to the heart and character and that are of lived life. And so Abu Ya'za takes him on as almost like a disciple. And Abu Madyan starts to realize now that he is learning a second type of knowledge, that which is not taught in the schools. He's taught the way of righteousness, which is not just the textbook way that people are accustomed to. And so time passes and he says, okay, now go and leave and take this little knowledge, that take what you've learned from us and leave and go give dawah. Okay. And he does that, and his life as a da'i and a scholar, he's a scholar of dawah. There are scholars who cater to other scholars. There are scholars who just lead local villages as imams. But Abu Madyan is a traveling scholar. He's a da'iyah. And he becomes, and he's not any just storyteller. He's an actual faqih. And he begins to amass to gain the respect of the people of Morocco and Andalusia, little by little by little by little, until he's considered their patron. As an elder, as years and decades go by, Abu Madyan becomes considered the sheikh of Al-Gharb, Al-Maghrib. All right. In other words, he's the one who establishes their manhaj as Malikis, as he sets down what it means, what is the suluk of the matters of the heart and worship and all these things, and he sets all that down. So he becomes the patron sheikh of Al-Maghrib, and he comes to learn about Al-Faqih al-Muqaddam and his path, and he sends him his authorization. Right. In other words, when they give someone the khirqa, they didn't have formal authorization back in those days. They gave him one of his garments to indicate that you're upon what I'm upon, and you continue the work. Right. So that's basically a little bit about Abu Madyan. We ended up talking about Abu Madyan today more so than Al-Faqih al-Muqaddam, but that's okay. We'll just take another paragraph of Faqih al-Muqaddam before we check the live chat and call it a day. So back to Faqih al-Muqaddam. The climate in which he lived was so unstable that Al-Faqih would sit in the lessons of his teacher, Sheikh Ali Ba Marwan, with his sword on his lap. Okay. Different tribes were vying for power in Hadramaut. And the Adawi Sayyids, because of their popularity, were seen by the tribal leaders as a threat. Al-Faqih al-Muqaddam had no desire for political power and hated to see bloodshed and dissension in the ranks of the Muslims. He thus symbolically broke his sword, announcing that his way and the way of the Adawi Sayyids and those that loved and followed them was one that would not fight for power. They would not fight them for power. Other tribes are coming in. They basically said, we are not fighting you for power. You want it? Take it. We're breaking our sword. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam had warned of this internal division. Okay, he has narrated in Hadith in Sahih Muslim, and informs us that the one who sits at these times is better than the one who stands. All right. He then praised the one who takes his sword and breaks its blade with a rock. The fact that Faqih al-Muqaddam had embraced this path of tazkiyah, right, and refusing to fight, right, however, was not a withdrawal from society. It was a non-violent involvement with society. He would not be violent with society. And he withdrew from all of the fitan. Okay? But in fact, he had a different sword now. His sword was ilm. Right? Knowledge was his sword. And he was able, by relinquishing any political desires, openly saying, I am not engaging in any political feuds. I'm not trying to seek power. This actually enabled him to more freely travel the circles of the tribes and spread knowledge. So he was able to become a teacher to all the tribes, and none of the people felt threatened by him. Okay, so that was the deal. He and the Adawi Sayyids after him would use the respect in which they were held. They were held to great respect by the other tribes for their path of not seeking power and breaking their swords, and they were welcomed into their tents, which means they were welcomed into their lands to teach. They were held with great respect as a result. They brought harmony to society by teaching the huquq of fellow Muslims. So one of the things they taught was, what is the right of another Muslim? When do we break with another Muslim? When do we fight another Muslim? Right? And they're very rare, very, very rare times where you do that. And what are the rights of another Muslim? By teaching these huquq, okay? By teaching the importance of visiting the sick, attending all funeral prayers, no matter who it was, right? By them establishing gatherings of knowledge, right? And remembrance and storytelling. The good storytelling of the Salihin and the Sahaba and the Anbiya. They ended up spending their wealth on the poor and needy of these tribes. Okay, by having large walimas, or in other words, gatherings of food, large feasts for people, everyone, rich and poor. For building masajid and places of learning, and establishing awqaf, which are endowments. That planting date palm trees along the road, organizing, helping irrigation, and providing drinking water for travelers and city dwellers. And so this was the social work, the involvement in society that Al-Faqih al-Muqaddam set himself to when he swapped out fighting. When he said, we're no longer going to fight, you all take power, right? You want power, take power. What we're going to do is we're going to do this work. We're going to teach, right? We don't want your power, so you can welcome us into your lands. We'll come in. We'll set up lessons. We'll set up irrigation. If we learn how to irrigate, we'll set up irrigation. We'll build palm trees out of charity, and we'll do all these things, right? He would give out barrels and barrels of dates, okay, for the poor. And he had a wife. His wife was Sayyidah Zainab, the daughter of his uncle, and she also would help him do this. Just as he was concerned with the general populace, he also established a zawiyah. Okay, he also established a zawiyah. And that zawiyah was to develop his disciples. You can't just expend your whole life with the people. You need to produce heirs, right? So he needed pupils who he would instruct on the spiritual path, and he would instruct in Shafi'i law, right? And one of his best was his son. He has sons, Alawi, Abdullah, Abdurrahman, Ahmed, Ali. They were all mashayikh. They were all imams just like him. Sheikh Abdullah bin Abbad, Sheikh Abdurrahman bin Abbad, Sheikh Ali bin Muhammad al-Khatib, all of these were followers of Al-Faqih al-Muqaddam. So he had a zawiya, which was a small area. Zawiya means a small area, small little masjid, right? In which they would conduct their lessons, and he would instruct them on their path, so that he would have heirs after he died to succeed his work. Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Saqaf said, I have not heard speech more powerful than the speech of Al-Faqih al-Muqaddam, other than the speech of the Anbiya. Okay? I do not give any of the awliya precedence over him, right? Other than the Sahaba, or someone whose merit was mentioned by the Prophet, such as Uwais al-Qarni. So Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Saqaf, one of the successors later on, he said that they do not hold anybody to be superior to Al-Faqih al-Muqaddam, because he literally transformed Hadramaut. Al-Faqih was the first to establish the annual visit, as one of the ways to unify the tribes and to unify the people. He established the annual visitation of Hud, Sayyidina Hud alayhi salam, the area where he's buried. Okay. Imam al-Haddad said in praise of him, he's the sheikh of the shuyukh, he's the master of the giants, he's the sheikh of everyone on the path of Allah. He's a caller to Allah with words and actions. His state at the beginning of his path was like the state of his contemporaries at the end of their path. So he is the mujaddid for them, for sure. Towards the end of his life, he retired completely. He retired completely from all what he was doing, helping with irrigation, building palm trees, bringing tribes together, visiting the sick, going to all the funerals, giving talks, giving classes, talking about huquq, right? Teaching his heirs and establishing this path that they would never raise the sword. He retired from all this. All right. Once he knew that he had disciples and his sons and his students were in place, he shunned the creation completely, and he began to simply be alone in ibadah. And he would keep the company of his wife, of course. He was asked who would be the sheikh after him, who's the leader after him. He said al-Fuqara, which is his wife Zainab, okay, who was named like Zainab bint Khuzaimah was al-Masakin. So he called her al-Fuqara, right? That she has been his best supporter in life. That, I mean, it was a big struggle. He came in a time of civil strife, and he transformed all that. And he said that she would continue his work after his death. His students would come to her for guidance. Al-Faqih was he passed away in the year 653, which is 1255, and he's buried at Zambal, right? Whenever we said that on Fridays after Jum'ah, after Asr, they all go, after Jum'ah, the habit of the Badawi, even in Mecca they did this, is after Jum'ah you go home, you have a majlis with the family, you eat food, you rest up, and then you go down when the sun has cooled a little bit to the graveyard. You give salams to everyone in the graveyard. All right, and his is the first one that's visited at the Zambal, and therefore he becomes known as al-Muqaddam, because he's the first one there. His grave is given precedence over all. He's universally recognized as Sheikh of the Alawiyya, right? And all chains, he's the Sheikh of the Ba'alawi. He's the founder of the Ba'alawi. And all chains of connection return back to him. The great Imams came forth from his progeny in every generation, who continue to spread the light of prophecy until the present time. And all of them take this attitude: we don't want your power. We don't want power. We're here to teach. Take all the power yourself, and we're here to give and teach people their rights. So that's the life of the great Imam Al-Faqih, al-Muqaddam. And we also talked about Abu Madyan as well, right? So let's take a look at some of the questions in the live chat real quick. We've been here for 55 minutes now, so we'll try to make it 5 minutes so we wrap up in an hour. And again, for those who joined late, we were blacked out by Zoom for some reason. It must be some glitch or something. There's always some glitch with this technology. Azra Fuat is asking about reliable books about the stories of the Salaf. You can get the book and you can download it. It's called the Qushayri's Risala. Risala Qushayriya. I'll just type it in here real quick. Just type it in Risala Qushayriya PDF and you'll find that. Okay. Abu Bakr al-Ansari. Which, you mean, are you talking about the companions or who is, I'm not familiar who is Abu Bakr al-Ansari. Okay, what can be the reason for Muslims having different cultures and national personalities is a question here. Well, one of the reasons is, look, geography. One of the reasons is history, in other words, wars, recent history. One of the reasons is their economy. How do they make their living? Okay. Any people who make their living from agriculture, they're going to be a kinder people than people who make their living from business, right? People who make their living from business will be a more flexible, witty, street smart people than people who made their living from war. For example, the Ottoman Empire, how did they make their living? By war. They were an economy of ghazwa. They would go and capture cities, and if those cities either accepted Islam and supported their economy or didn't, and if they didn't, they were able to tax them, because a Muslim is not allowed to tax another Muslim. But he can have a property tax upon lands that he conquers. We call this kharaj. So that's how they made their living. So based upon their economy, what the overall job that they earn their wealth by, plus local histories like recent wars, plus the geography. So wherever the sun, the temperatures are moderate and warm, okay, you find the nature of the people to be balanced and happy. So Californians, for example, are happier people overall as a overall temperament, right? Happy, creative, than New Yorkers, okay, who are it rains in New York, it suddenly rained. The climate in the Northeast is just unpredictable. You wake up, you don't know what's going to happen, right? It's unpredictable weather. Okay, population density has a lot to do with it. Anywhere you have a lot of high population density, you're going to have people a bit more testy, a little bit more shrewd. Okay, people are trying to cheat, people are trying to hustle. So Cairo, New York, Karachi, the population density is so high that all of these people are hustlers. Just by nature, everyone's a hustler, right? Well, that's not the case if you go to Kentucky or South Carolina, okay, where there's no need for this hustling, okay? So there's not going to be a new kid on the block every month to knock you off your pedestal or to knock you off or to compete against you. But that's going to be the case in Cairo. It's going to be the case in New York, in London. You're going to have to be a hustler because there's always going to be a new kid on the block to knock you off, right? And to take your position. So these are all reasons why there are national personalities. It is true that there is something called the national personality. Like, what is the dominant traits of these people that are noticeable by anyone who visits them? So political circumstances goes under recent history, right? So if your country is the political leader, there's going to be a little bit of arrogance there too. Okay. Should I accept a Eid invitation of a friend who commits zina openly. Well, we have a rule that anyone who adopts a heretical belief or who sins shamelessly and openly, that we should not keep their company. So someone committing a major sin, we're talking major sin, openly, such as zina, then we will not. We shouldn't keep their company. That's the general rule. Now, this case by case basis is up to you to determine that. I'm not going to tell you what to do about a case by case, a specific case, but the general rule of fasiq is we don't keep their company because they can influence us. And if you think that you're beyond influence, that's not true, right? That's not true. Okay. San Naz says I think they go Friday to Zembal after Fajr. Yeah, that could be the case, right? That could be the case. Nabila says, will we still get the same reward of the one who sits in the same place remembering Allah after Fajr if we move places or take a quick break? Inshallah, that should be the case, but it'll be more thorough if a person stays in the same spot. But if you just move places and you have a need to get up for some reason, then you will get, and then you come back and pray the duha, or also known as ishraq, same thing, then inshallah we'll get that reward. And you know what we should actually do to make our stream more in accord to the sunnah is we should really stop exactly at ishraq time, which is, I'll tell you, 20 minutes after the end of Fajr. So sunrise is 5:29. So at 5:49, we should have stopped. So we basically should stop around now. At 29 minutes, right after 20 minutes after sunrise, is exactly when the way that I've seen the mashayikh do it. That's when they stop. So at 5:49 on the nose, they stop. So we'll, inshallah, going forward, we'll do that. We'll just take the last question here. What if you do remember Allah until sunrise, then decide to take a nap, then wake up and pray duha? Will we get the same reward? It will be. All of that will be of great reward, and it's tears. It's not an on-off button, but it's more like tears, or like what do you call these? With the lights that you can adjust. You can adjust the light and dim it. So there are degrees of it, of perfection, right? Of goodness of the thing. And the best of it is to pray Fajr, to do the Adhkar, to have a little khatira like this, and then exactly 20 minutes after sunrise, we close the khatira, and then everyone prays duha or ishraq, same thing, and then that's it. That's the way that's what Habib Omar does every single day, even if he has an all-nighter, even if he stayed up. I remember one time they were driving from Maryland up to my house in Connecticut, when I was living in New Haven. And they ended up, their car stalled in the middle of Maryland, right? To the point they were supposed to arrive at Isha time. They were supposed to pray Isha with me, right? Their car stalled for about 4 hours, okay, in the middle of nowhere. They fixed their car. They drove up. They said they had to take another pit stop. They took a pit stop in Trenton, New Jersey, where they went to Abdul Qadir Wiswal's house. They stayed there at Abdul Qadir Wiswal's house. He made them dinner, right? And it was amazing that night, someone in that family had a dream that said, Habib Omar's having dinner with us today. And they literally arrived at 2 in the morning, right? 1 in the morning. All right, so they stopped there. They prayed Salat al-Isha there at his house. And then they said, let's go. Because he had an appointment at 9 a.m. at Yale the next morning. So they they pulled up to my house, and I sat up waiting, right? They pulled up at my house at about 5 a.m., right? they had not slept the entire night. They were driving the entire night, a trip that should have taken about, it's quite a hike, 6 hours, right? But it took them a lot more than that, right? From Maryland to Connecticut, it's like a 6-hour trip. From Jersey to Connecticut, that's 2 to 3 hours, depending on how fast you go, right? So they ended up arriving at 5 a.m. And I'm thinking to myself, subhanAllah, everyone's going to come and crash. Nothing changed. Fajr, Salat al-Fajr, we had to pray right away. We prayed Fajr right away. We stayed up right until Ishraq. And he always asks, there's a timekeeper that has his eye on the watch. 20 minutes after sunrise on the dot, the majlis is broken up, is ended, and they pray Salat al-Ishraq or Duha, and then they stop. So that'll be our, inshallah, we'll try to establish that habit going forward. Last question: what madhab was followed in the Hijaz before the Salafis came in? Najd was on the Hanbali school, but the Gulf were Maliki. And the Gulf is still Maliki. The Gulf Arabs are still Malikis. And then the rest of Hijaz, I think it was, I don't know, it depends on, but I do know that the Gulf states were all Maliki scholars. And still today, the official madhab, they're Maliki in the Gulf. Right, there are still some in Saudi. Sheikh Naif, Faqih Nafsak is his website in Arabic, and I think maybe it's in English too. Faqih Nafsak is his website. Sheikh Naif, he's a Maliki scholar. Well-respected Maliki scholar as well. All right, everybody. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wal 'asr inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.